What do you think is the worst type of Roblox game? Like the absolute bottom of the barrel? If you've been on this platform as long as I have, you know there are bound to be some that you just despise. Maybe it's those unoriginal cash grabs that pull thousands of players. The many that are plagued by the worst communities imaginable. Or maybe it's just the ones you have personal beef with. It's no surprise that Roblox harbors some real stinkers in their catalog. But I believe I know of something even worse than what you're thinking of. The cesspit culmination of ignorance and bad understanding. I have concluded that that title would very easily go to joke games. I hate joke games. I just don't think anything else beats it in terms of how bad they are. Seriously, nobody should ever play these. They are that bad.
Oh, Electro, you stupid f***ing idiot. Joke games are meant to be bad. That's their appeal. What? Do you just hate fun and whimsy?
Now don't get me wrong, I love when games don't take themselves seriously. In fact, Piggy is probably my favorite Roblox game of all time, and that game started off as a joke. But I'm not talking about games like Piggy. No, there is one specific type of joke game that I'd wish to discuss for this video. One that I think is genuinely irredeemable and stands above the rest as the absolute worst of all time. But first, I think it's best I define what a joke game is. A joke game to me is an inherently satire experience and is made for the sole purpose to entertain the consumer via humor, just like the ones told on the daily. Of course, these aren't meant to be confused with roguelikes, party games, or any other ones that just have a sense of humor, as they are just regular experiences that can have their moments. Joke games are executed in a plethora of different ways. For example, there are a few that have a wacky concept and are fun gameplay wise and visual wise, some that are satirically bad visually but have some amusing play, and finally we reach the main topic for this video. Joke games that end up getting insanely popular and are extremely unfun both gameplay wise and appalling to look at visual wise, keep updating, but never improve at all thanks to being a joke game. Or in other words, a bad joke game. Sure, the excuse of it's a joke game, it's meant to be bad can be used in some scenarios. The reasoning being bad equals funny isn't 100% true. Now, of course comedy is subjective, but these games subjectively piss me off. And that's due to one key element. The gameplay. Now sure, there is much leeway for visuals or animations to be a bit goofy, but there is a lot less wiggle room when working on the action. I'm just gonna be blunt here, intentionally bad gameplay does not make your game any funnier, nor does it make it any better. If your gameplay is so dreadful to the point that playing it is a chore to get through, chances are it's not gonna be funny or entertaining either. So, then what's left? I'll tell you, you're just left with a bad game with no substance. Do you see where I'm coming from? Everywhere! This excuse of bad equals funny is used to defend popular joke games from any form of backlash or critique. Yes, joke games are meant to be bad, but bad in the sense that it entertains the player rather than ticking them off. For example, last year when I criticized a joke game called Scary Horror Game, I got this one comment from a viewer saying that the game was justified in the sense that it was a joke and it was meant to make fun of the poor horror scene. And while that is true, it doesn't make it any better as a joke, a mockery, or a thing to be played either. All of those things are meant to be nutty or somewhat entertaining to an extent. Scary Horror Game to me didn't achieve any of that with stolen gameplay and just plain bad visuals. That's why I criticized it so much. Something that I think people need to understand is that gameplay being annoying because it's a joke game does not make it a better joke game. It's just a reason why it's a bad joke game. Where is the funny part in a game that soft-locks when I try to do anything? Where is the funny part in forcing myself to do nothing but hold W for 30 seconds? It is ridiculous! Look, I'm not saying you aren't allowed to make games for fun. In fact, I encourage it. But on the off chance that your game begins to actually gain attractions, you should take that opportunity to interact with feedback rather than using a sentence as a shield. But why am I bringing this excuse up? Because criticism is undeniably the most important thing a project can have. When any form of criticism from the fanbase is ignored, there's nothing left but a subpar experience. If it isn't funny, it's no longer bad equals funny, it becomes bad equals bad. The act of making something intentionally look flawed for irony instantly becomes obsolete the moment the viewer starts getting bored. The gameplay needs to complement the visuals or else it's just not gonna work. It's much different to ironically bad videos or music because those ones actually entertain you and make you laugh, whereas bad joke games will do the opposite by trapping you in a miserable gameplay loop and waiting for something of substance to happen. Take for instance Weird Strict Dad, a game that harbors numerous issues with pacing, objectives, and balance. The overall ordeal isn't fun, isn't funny, it's really just a mediocre experience. I'm not even kidding, in some playthroughs the footage had to be sped up because of how slow walking through it is. And despite being endlessly criticized by the Roblox cohort, it never improved thanks to being a joke game. Weed Strict Dad had a banger opportunity for good gameplay, but since it was a joke, there was no actual incentive to improve and make it fun, especially considering how big it got anyways with its horrible design. The second you criticize a joke game for being on a horror state, players just respond with the game is meant to be ironically bad. Yes, that's true! You know what else the game is meant to be? Fun! Jokes are meant to be fun as well. Look, I'm not saying that all shitposts should be stretched to their fullest potential and be taken seriously, but ignoring all feedback to leave it in an intentionally unfun state is not a good idea in practice. If you don't want any association with your game after it blows up, or if it doesn't, fine, I don't care. But if any new or old developers are still trying to take care of your golden goose, it should be no surprise that you should take the feedback. Die of Death, as of its most recent update, is a joke game I believe is good in this case. It never takes itself seriously and can be genuinely fun at times. It has a gameplay loop with a wide selection of game modes and abilities to choose from, which helps give it a sense of variety. Despite it being a joke as stated in the description, developers acknowledge the criticism it receives and seek to improve them instead of bluntly ignoring it, even if its attempts are pretty bad. Not to say that Die of Death doesn't have any flaws, no, but Die of Death is proving that constructive feedback doesn't even make anything less funny and actually helps it accomplish what it sets out to do. I never get people who defend ignoring actual viable feedback, because it just makes the people behind these games look detached and lazy from what would be a very promising project. Die of Death, in my eyes, is a good joke game. It juggles fitting all the criteria in terms of being somewhat entertaining or funny, not looking too good to be taken seriously, while also accounting complaints that would otherwise hinder the fun factor. On the other hand, if developers always ignore player backlash, their game will always be mediocre and unfunny. This is why I believe joke games are the worst type of Roblox game. Not only because they're just really poorly made, but because while other experiences will always have the opportunity to improve, games like these will never, at least as long as the developer stays in that mindset. Take You vs. Homer for example. This joke game is merely just a copy of something else and got insanely popular in 2025, but now stands at a measly 140 players. In the end, if you ignore all criticism, you just get a bad and sloppy game that will never push itself to a better state. Because it is so lackluster, the average person will play it, get through the horrible ass gameplay, just for absolutely nothing funny to happen. It wasn't amusing, it wasn't fun, it's merely just a disappointing experience for both ends too. And you know what the worst part of this is? There is a chance that after so many people have played your poorly designed mess, those players might think that's cool and continue making terrible joke games and using the same excuse to deflect feedback. You cannot tell me this is okay. You know, despite me expressing my visceral hatred for these stupid unfunny joke games are still my favorite type of Roblox game. I've dedicated 6 years of my life to playing Piggy, a game that started off as a joke but then actually improved. Piggy is proof that a silly premise can genuinely evolve into an absolute masterpiece when done right. It really goes to show that the quality of a game really depends on the choices made by the developer rather than its general concept. On one hand, they could really try and improve their mistakes for the better entertainment of their player base, and on the other hand, they can ignore all backlash given to them and end up with a sloppy project that doesn't charm their intended audience. It's really night and day here, and making this video really emphasized to me how important feedback and execution really is. At the end of the day, just because your game is a meme doesn't mean your development has to be a disaster. You can use humor to reel in players, but you can also get them to use their time productively with a fun experience that doesn't take itself too seriously. Thanks for watching, and by the way, this video was a joke and you can't criticize me for it.